Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
All right, welcome to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. This is Thursday, February 20th, episode 173. And about an hour ago, I tore up the old rundown and created a new one. And this one's one page because there's breaking news in the Spurs world. Victor Wembanyama out for the season with a deep vein thrombosis in his right shoulder. Don Harris, Chuck Miketinac, and I are going to talk about that for the next half hour or so. Guys, that was not the news I expected today. Don, tell me what you know.
All we know is that Victor has a blood clot in his right shoulder and that he is going to miss the rest of the season. And from what we are told, it seems to be an isolated event, not caused by any genetic condition, but probably by an injury of some sort that presented itself, and that he is expected to make a full recovery in time. The closest thing that I can see that in sports that I remember, and Chuck will know a lot about this because it happens with baseball pitchers quite a bit, was Brandon Ingram of the Lakers, then Pelicans, who had same exact thing, right shoulder, deep vein thrombosis, and he had what's called a thoracic outlet syndrome, which is when a vein gets pinched somewhere, probably between the collarbone and the first rib or somewhere else, and it cuts off the blood supply to that vein. Baseball pitchers, it's a very common occurrence when you hear the words thoracic outlet syndrome. We have not heard that with Victor. We've just heard a blood clot in his right shoulder. So it could be caused by a different manner. But the fact that they think it's isolated and they're saying words like full recovery is a lot better than chronic Chris Bosh type condition where you might worry about retirement.
Yeah, we'll talk about the differences there here in a little bit. Chuck, first initial thoughts upon this information. This is brand new. It came out just about hour 20 minutes ago is when the news broke. So.
Well, you and I were working back to back. You were working on, I'm presuming, the podcast, and I was working on getting set up for a NFL thing with Daniel Jeremiah. And when you said that, the first thing, well, it took me a second, first of all, for it to register that this is what had happened. And then the second thing is that goes through your mind is, wait, deep vein thrombosis? Isn't that blood clot related? And so instantly my mind goes to a bad place when I hear something like that, because that seems like it's very, very serious. And it is, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, the day completely shifts, right? You're in a different mode, and then all of a sudden you get a story like this, and obviously you're worried about another human's health. Especially a highly skilled, highly trained athlete. It's not something that you commonly see, right, with a guy Victor's age. So, panic mode, and then you start making some calls and you talk to doctors that'll kind of talk you off the ledge a little bit. And so in that regard, I feel like a lot better place in terms of where my mental state is around this than I was an hour ago.
First thing that I think a lot of us felt and thought when you don't know what a deep vein thrombosis is, even when you do know what it is I hope he's okay. And from all indications, from what the Spurs have told us, he is okay. They're not concerned about this being a lingering issue. They are concerned about it being a isolated incident, and that's why he's going to be out for the season. DVT is which is a deep vein thrombosis, is basically a blood clot in his shoulder that, if dislodged, could head to other places, which is why you can't play a contact sport like basketball with one of them, because if it gets dislodged, it goes to your brain, it can cause a stroke by cutting off the blood flow to your brain. I'm not a doctor, but this is what my doctor friend told me. I think the panic, though, when it comes to Spurs fans and seeing their French phenom go down with an injury like this, that isn't a broken leg, that's not easily digestible like that, is real. And I think that there's still a certain level of panic right now going through Spurs Nation.
Well, the fact that they diagnosed it, right? And so he's immediately put on Plavix or some other blood thinning medication. Again, we don't know if this is similar, but Chuck knows this story, and that is in 2018, my son was lifting weights, had a similar had an injury of some sort. Didn't happen overnight. He did not know that he had hurt his shoulder. He just was sore for a couple of days. He was working for the Pelicans at the time. They were in Oklahoma City, and he was rebounding before a game, and his arm went kind of numb, and he felt some tingling, and he called me and said, "Hey, I got some weird tingling, but I think I just did something to my shoulder lifting weights." Okay. And then he said, I was at the Super Bowl in Minneapolis. He said, "We're playing there Saturday night. Do you want to go to the game?" And I said, "Sure." So he comes up to Minnesota and says, "You want to go to the game tonight?" I said, "Sure." I'll get David Chancellor to do the 10. It was a Saturday night. And I went down to get my Uber to go to the Pelicans Timberwolves game. And he said, "Don't come to the game. Go to the hospital. They're taking me to the hospital." So what for? He said, "My right arm is huge, swollen up." Went to the emergency room. Long story short, he had done something lifting weights 4 or 5 days earlier where the rib was pinched by the collarbone, and those vessels caused a blood clot. It was pinched, and that's what caused the blood clot coming back. He had to have his first rib removed and to free up the vessel. The blood clot remained, but he was immediately put on blood thinning medications, and because of that was allowed to fly back to New Orleans the very next day. So they can take the danger part out about that dislodging thing out immediately with the blood thinners. It will take time for it to completely
Dissolve,
go away. Yeah. And so because of the blood thinners, as Chuck was also hearing from the doctor, you can't be cut. You can't have a big injury. You can't even have a bruise somewhere else if you have contact because of the bleeding.
I wanted to ask Chuck about that. Chuck, tell me about the visit you just had. He just got off a Zoom with a local doctor here in San Antonio.
Yeah, shout out, by the way, Dr. Brad Gerwitz putting me in touch with Greg Gurley, who's a retired hematologist here in San Antonio. I'm sorry, Greg Gutley. And, he said, precisely around the same things that Don was just saying, which was, a lot of this stuff can be treated outpatient, right? But the biggest thing, and, obviously without the hematologist knowing what exactly we're dealing with here with Victor's individual situation, the fact is that, I've lost my train of thought here trying to get all this doctor stuff into my head, but Dr.
The bleeding. The bleeding.
Yeah, and you're right. Thank you for reminding me that the bleeding aspect of it, that could be simply why Victor's going to be missing the rest of the year, because the last thing you want to have happen, obviously, is a guy that's playing a physical, demanding sport, and if you cut or get cut while you're on blood thinners, that could be a potentially dangerous situation if you can't coagulate the blood. So that could be the very reason alone why they're shutting Victor down for the rest of the year.
Not to mention shaving. Seriously.
Fair enough. I think it's important to denote, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, that this is not a similar situation to what Chris Bosh had.
We don't know, right?
Right now, from what we understand, it is not Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh's career was ended because of a blood clotting disorder. He continued to clot. He had a pulmonary embolism in his lungs that caused his season to end, on top of a deep vein thrombosis. And then after they thought he was going to come back, he continued to get blood clots and was on blood thinners, which is why he couldn't play a contact sport. This is not, right now, as we sit here.
Correct.
That is not this.
Correct.
This is not that. This is much closer to what you said earlier with the Brandon Ingram injury. Got it in his right arm, ended up out for the season on March 9th, came back next season, was totally fine. For the Hornets now, obviously, for the Pelicans now, obviously, on the Raptors. This is much closer to that than it is to a Chris Bosh situation, and I think Spurs fans need to, pump the brakes when they're saying, "Oh no, it's going to be Chris Bosh." We don't think so yet, as of right now.
No, we don't think so. We don't think that it will become that. And there are, like I said, there are probably a dozen or more examples if you just Google thoracic outlet baseball pitcher arm injuries. It's a similar thing. And so it's not common for a 21-year-old to have a blood clot, but it can happen to athletes who injure that area of the body.
Want to get to some of the chat items, people commenting on our chat.
I
and
will
stuff
say
like that,
this.
but-
I will say this.
or not.
Real fast. my antenna goes up a little bit of concern when you think of the difference in Victor's physiology. You know, he is different. He's a lot longer. His arms are a lot longer. His veins are a lot longer. All of these things. I think we felt the thing when he came out and got drafted by the Spurs. If he stays healthy, feet injuries were a concern. People that big of feet, he's different. And so when I heard this, my immediate reaction was, okay, is this because Victor's different, or is this because there was some sort of injury? From what we're hearing, it's probably the latter, which is good news.
Bob, want to?
Tom Guerrero is in the house.
Shout
Thank
out
you,
Tom
Tom.
Guerrero.
Roger says, prayers to your son, Don. Geez, that's awful.
Oh, he's fine. It's years ago.
Lots of
thank you.
people are sending prayers and well wishes to Wemby. And I think this was inevitable. Someone's asking about COVID-19 shots. Is that a contributing factor?
Not even going to get into that. We have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to. How
Yeah.
would we know that? We
I
don't
just-
even know exactly the
I
severity.
just had to throw it
of-
out there because it came up multiple times in the chat already.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not even going to touch that. A buddy
It's
of
the
mine,
UFO that flew under the left wing of that plane today.
also in the medical field, was his immediate reaction was he wonders if this happened on the flight back from France because it's such a long flight. Someone so large like that, blood clots can accumulate, or there is a risk for blood clots when you're sitting for a long period of time. That was his initial reaction when he first
Look,
heard that,
there's
and we
gonna
don't,
be a
and we have
million-
no idea.
There's a million things to be thrown against the wall. Who knows?
Well, you know David Bloom, right, from NBC News?
Yeah.
He died in Iraq from this.
Yeah, pulmonary embolism.
They saved from riding on the tank for all that time.
Overall, just not a great situation and something that is jarring when you see it. Immediate reaction is hopefully he's okay. Secondarily, though, how does this affect the outlook for the Spurs season going forward now without their young superstar who hadn't yet been able to gel with their new superstar, De'Aaron Fox, and they were still working out kind of the kinks of this entire lineup? Don?
I was getting to the point that where I didn't think the playoffs or even the play-in was doable when I started to look at the standings and the numbers. They could have made the 10 seed. They were 5 games back. But, the L's were stacking up, man. That latest first leg of the rodeo road trip, they had 2 winnable games that at the buzzer that they lost and falling farther and farther behind in the standings. So now that Wemby's out, I would think, it's pretty safe to say they're a lottery team. And as I said before, when I thought they were going to be potentially a lottery team, it's not the worst thing in the world. When you have 2 picks that you're going to get your own and Atlanta's most likely, and this draft class headed by Cooper Flagg and others, it's not the worst thing in the world. Because if you make the playoffs, you get swept in the first round by Oklahoma City. I mean, we'd all like to see them make the playoffs.
Well, you need to get to the playoffs at some point. You need to
Yeah.
learn how to win in the playoffs at some point.
Yeah,
So
but
getting
I
to the
looked at
playoffs
that.
is never a bad thing.
But it's never a bad thing. You learn from going to the playoffs. I looked this up today. Oklahoma City, the team that I think can win the championship this year.
100%.
In 21, they won 22 games. In 22, they won 24 games. Then 23, they won 40, and then 57. So 20, 21, 22, whatever it is. But they went 22, 24, 40, and 57. And now this year they're going to win plus 60. So I think I'd be concerned if it didn't happen next year with a full season of Castle, Fox, and Wemby. But I think next season is a year where they can win 45 plus
Okay.
and should.
2020, 22, 22, 23 is where we're at right now. So I think we're a year behind on that trajectory.
Hey, Don, an SA radio boy who looks an awful like Walter Pasacreta.
Yeah.
Wally had a comment in there. He says, this takes the team off the griddle. They were headed for a failed season.
I don't know if they're heading for a failed season or anything like that, but this certainly brings back, once I got to thinking about this a little bit, it made me think of when David got hurt and they ended up with Tim. You have two picks right now in the first round of this year's draft. One of them is your own, one of them is Atlanta's. Both of them highly coveted. Now the Spurs pick looks a little bit better than Atlanta's because Atlanta's been playing better as of late. At this point, if you have an ailment on De'Aaron Fox, does he, take a couple of games off?
Oh, for sure.
Do they start doing what they've done the past couple of years and not attempting to win close games?
No, they're going to try to win. They're going to try to win. I just don't know that they can win.
Well, they also don't have a big man on their roster now.
That's correct.
They have Bismack Biyombo. That's it. The Jeremy Sohan is going to be playing.
Yeah, they're going to have to play run and gun at this point, right? I mean, you don't have the fail-safe underneath the basket that they've been, quite frankly, relying on too much. Just filter it all down to Victor and make him turn around and think otherwise. But I think this is something that's going to create opportunity. If there is a sentiment in the locker room, and we don't know that there is, but if there is one where maybe Victor's getting too much of the attention, maybe we shouldn't be doing everything around Victor, maybe, and I'm not saying that that's the case, but this is a chance for other guys to now get an opportunity to show what they can do, show what they're capable of, and show how well they can play together without the quote unquote face of the franchise. So, it should always be, in my opinion, next man up in mentality. And now we'll see if they can handle it. I would agree. They really look undermanned now with no big fella on this team.
To Walter's question about a failed season, Vegas picked them to win 38 games before the season started. Had Wemby stayed healthy, and they would have gone about 500 the rest of the way.
They would have been at 38.
They would have been right at 38. So I don't know. It would have been a failed season. There were higher expectations than that for sure.
I don't know if this is a failed season anyway. When Victor Wembanyama goes out for the season after he plays 46 games after they've played 52 as a whole, your expectation for the season dramatically changes. At this point,
for sure.
At this point right now, was it a failed season? Were they underperforming? I would say yes. I would say that I expected them to be closer to 26 and 26 than 23 and 29. But now your expectations go out the window. They have to be completely redone. Your expectation for the season now is I hope they go 23 and 59 because then that gives them a better chance at Cooper Flag. That's my desire for the team. I hope they don't win another game this season. However, that's not going to happen. But your expectation now, I would put their win total closer to 31 instead of 38.
Yeah, that's fair.
De'Aaron Fox is not going to let them lose out. Stephon Castle, Chris Paul, these are not losers.
No, they're not.
These are winners.
I'm curious to see what this looks like starting tonight. I mean, because this is a huge blow, obviously. There's no question. I mean, for Victor personally and for the franchise, I mean, this is the guy that people are lining up to see play ball. And the fact that he's not here, and now everybody says you're going to be, and whatever the rest of the season is, again, we'll see what they're made of. I think there's enough dudes in that room where I think maybe we might be a little bit surprised.
Yeah. I think this all just came as a huge shock, and I think it's still a shock, especially for me, because yesterday we hear that he has an illness. He's doubtful for tonight. We think, oh, okay, he has the South Texas sniffles, and he's going to be out for a game. And now you hear that he has a deep vein thrombosis. We don't know how long he's been playing with it for. People in recent weeks have seen that his conditioning has taken a little bit of a hit, that he's been breathing harder, that he's had a little bit of shortness of breath. And some doctors, especially some people that I've spoken to, have speculated that with a deep vein thrombosis can impact the oxygen going to your lungs, and in turn the oxygen going to the rest of your body, making you more tired, more exhausted, more easily. So that explains some of the things that have been happening.
He said post All-Star game, he felt great, and he felt like he could give 100%, and he gave 100% all the time, and he felt so much better than he did a year before. So, I mean, that's a little contradictory because he felt like, what was the overall takeaway? The takeaway is I don't have to save anything in the tank. Like before I saved some things in the tank because I didn't want to get too tired. Now I know I can go full speed because I'm in the best shape. So I don't know. I don't know if they're related or not. His quote unquote fatigue, and we don't know.
We don't know anything for a fact right now, except the fact that he's out for the season, has deep vein thrombosis.
Yeah, the hematologist, we asked him about that too, and he said probably not, that it would probably not affect his stamina.
According to my wife, Jordan, who just tweeted at us, searches for deep vein thrombosis are up 1,000%, according to Google Trends, alongside searches for Wembanyama. The last 4 hours, unsurprisingly, a lot of them came from Texas. So
Imagine.
So I assume a lot of people are becoming WebMD superstars right now.
Deep vein thrombosis is usually old people's legs instead of young athletes' shoulders.
Young Frenchman's arms.
Yeah.
It's the new fad. So guys, to put a bow on this, and I'd want a 1-page rundown as opposed to a 4-page rundown that I usually have, because this is such a unique and interesting scenario here, in huge breaking news. As you go into and look at these next 2 games and the next 30 games in the season, what is your expectation for the team, and what do you want to see out of them without Victor?
I'd like to see growth from young players with losses to get a better position in the lottery. And then I think we just, take it day by day with Victor and wait for updates and see where this goes, with the optimistic view that it's similar to Brandon Ingram and that he'll make a full recovery. No guarantees,
I want to see bodies hitting the floor. I want to see bodies flying for loose balls in the stands. I mean, this has got to mean something, right? This is going to be an opportunity. Those minutes have to be cut up somewhere. And, I think there's a lot of guys that this is going to make whether or not they're on this team next year.
Yeah.
With this opportunity that now lies ahead, because they are going to have to play wildly different than what they've played here with when Victor's on the floor.
Just thinking about this season as a whole, it's so weird because it starts out with the Pop stuff going on in November, and then you don't know when Pop's going to come back. He's now been out for almost 4 months with his mild stroke. And then you have the trade for De'Aaron Fox, and you have the Steph Castle of it all. And now you have Victor, who's going to be out the rest of the season with a deep vein thrombosis, which isn't something you see every day. It's just this whole season, I can't wrap my head around how weird and just abnormal this season has been, Chuck.
Yeah.
I can't argue with you. I mean, I don't remember anything not anywhere on this level. And again, you talked about expectations going into the season. We can, I think, say without a doubt, they're way better than they were last year, right? But even
100%.
with that said, to me, the fact that they're 2 games out, or roughly whatever they are,
Of the 10
spot, I mean, still says that they're right there. And I think if you would have told us all in late February that that's where they would be, I would think that we would be saying that this would have been a pretty good season so far.
Oh, yeah.
So, obviously this changes the dynamic on if they can get there or not. But again, man, opportunity knocks. Who's going to be that guy that's going to really seize this opportunity and really win over the coaching staff, the franchise, that they want to be here? They'll do whatever it takes to be here. They want to be a part of something going forward. And I think this is going to be a nice little interesting 2 months to see what transpires.
Not the craziest of all time. Remember, Johnny Moore came down with desert fever in the 80s. Ended his career for a while, but then he made a comeback.
Only you.
I was thinking about Chris Paul for this. I think this really opens him up for more like on-court coaching, to be more of a leader of the team and everything, and to help the young guys even more. Is it?
I mean, this team really just has to. Now they have to make a move at center, because you can't play with Jeremy at your 5 the entire season.
You can.
You shouldn't.
It's an obvious tank if you do.
Yeah. Why don't you just say we're not trying to win games if you're going to play with Jeremy or Harrison or Bismack?
What about Mamu?
Okay.
I like the minutes Mamu gives us.
Go get Zach Collins back, I guess.
Well, Bassey gets back in a week.
Turn into a 3-point shooting team and
turn
run.
into one.
Get out.
They've already been one.
Get out and run more.
Any more comments from you at the moment?
Walter says, great point, Chuck. This team should have easier transition without Wemby. He's hard to adapt to. Talia asks a question: was Wemby on the 25 Summer League roster? I don't even understand the question.
Last year's Summer League roster, he was.
There's no way he would be on the next Summer League.
No,
he was doing Olympics.
He was in the Olympics last year.
And Walter also said, with Fox and a healthy Wemby with Castle, should be a top 6 in my opinion, and those close losses killed them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean they should
That's
be a top.
fair.
They should be a top 6 seed
Yeah.
next year.
Next year.
But
Yeah.
that, I mean, this year it's far from. It's a far cry from the 6th seed. We're
Yeah.
gonna really hope that. I think it would say a lot about this team and the youth of this team and the leadership of De'Aaron Fox, the leadership of Chris Paul, leadership of Harrison Barnes, and a coaching job by Mitch Johnson. If this team were to make the play,
Oh, it'd be a miracle now.
I mean, if you get to a 9 seed, 10, and you play and you maybe even win a play-in game,
Oh,
it would be, I think, a
Wildly-
resounding success for
Yeah.
this team.
and a failure for the lottery.
Absolutely, but hopefully Atlanta bottoms out. So we'll see. That's really the overriding positive here is that hopefully this is another Duncan Robinson situation where Robinson goes down, you bottom out, and then you get Tim Duncan, and then hopefully this time it's
How lucky
Victor
has the
goes
Spurs been?
Yeah.
Yeah,
For the luckiest-
through some good times.
for the luckiest franchise in sports. They're certainly getting a little unlucky here recently.
Yeah, well, they got the number 4 pick in last year's draft and ended up being the number 1 pick
Yeah, honestly, way better than Zachary Risachet.
so far.
Oh man, what a day!
Yeah.
Anything else from you at this point, Bob?
We're good to go.
All right, Walter, thanks for watching, and
Shout out Walter Pasquarita,
Shout out Wally.
Wally's Deli.
and thanks for shouting out my mess up on my super last night, Walter. I appreciate that. I accidentally put Spurs forward for Kevin Durant. That was my bad.
Hey, speaking into existence. there's nothing wrong
Maybe
with
next
that.
year. Maybe next year. That's all we got for today on the Sneaks Cleats podcast. Hearts and prayers go out to Victor Wembanyama. Hopefully everything
Amen.
ends up okay for him and he's back healthy again next year. And we'll see what happens with the Spurs tonight in Austin as Kevin Durant makes his return to Austin, not to the Moody Center. Moody Center is brand new in 2022. That's all we got for you today. We'll see you back here on Monday.